Okay, here we go. We're going to look at now the next part of this particular poem and see if we can come to an understanding about the uh, the second strophe in here. I'm probably going to leave the third one to you for a prompt. So making sure that you have watched these videos and that you can get um, to some sort of conclusion on your own, even if it's not, quote unquote, the right conclusion. I'm just curious to see how your brain works. So if you haven't watched the first video and the first two, really, please do so and make sure that you are following along. So we're going to get back to the poem. I'm going to share the screen with you. So we're going to look at this stanza here, all right? Stanza and a strophe, and this time they're actually interchangeable because they are, in fact, the same thing. So the whole thing, remember, we've been talking about time and how it's dealing with the paradox of the self and what it means to like want one thing and not actually be able to do it, that there's a history to the place where she's at, and this whole thing based on a kind of an impossibility, right? This paradox, the impossibility of a thing. So we have in here the introduction of the second person, if you, okay? So she says, if you walk long enough, okay? So again, we have time here, right? And action, all set on a hypothetical statement, right? An if then, based on hypothesis. Says if I walk long enough, right? Or if you walk long enough, your crowded head clears. And that's basically a thesis, right? That's what we call like a hypothesis. If then, if I walk long enough, my crowded head will clear. Crowded reminds me again, if I go back up to everyone, right? This sort of sense of so many people, right? There's a kind of sense of multitudinous in that space. And then she does a comparison with here, a simile, a like as here. So she says, if you walk long enough, your crowded head clears, like how all the cattle run off loudly as you approach. Which is a really beautiful, simple, simplistic, and an on-point image if you've ever been around cattle. And so that's like what the mind's like. So the mind is like a bunch of cattle, which aren't, pretty intelligent creatures, but we think of them as sort of prodding along, very much about a sort of a rural image, right? A farming image. So if I walk long enough, even wherever, I'm sorry, the crowded head clears, like how all the cattle run off loudly as you approach. And this loudly is kind of standing out to us because it's not necessary for the line, like we can still see the image, but it's that they make a clamor, which is like, this is kind of what we're looking for, to clear the mind, to come to a place of, let's say peace and quiet, right? In this place where so many people have come before this with all of this one. We also have sort of from buffalo to cattle, right? Buffalo being these wild animals hunted for, for generations, as we see here by the indigenous population, whereas cattle are distinctly different, right? Domesticated in a sense, and meant to be used for livestock, right? And of course, buffalo were not livestock. Buffalo were wild and hunted as such. So she says this fence, so a very particular word here with this, right? This fence, she's saying I'm looking at a very particular fence right now. So still very country images, keeping us in a space that we need to be in. This fence is a good fence. Okay, fair enough. And we can ask a lot of questions with this. And this is a good image to think about when we can go past just the surface level. What is a fence? What is its purpose? It keeps stuff in, it keeps people out. It's a structure. It has specific, it's built based on different rules depending on what you're trying to do. For instance, the fence in my backyard, it's considered a privacy fence because it's 6 feet tall, and it's designed specifically to keep people from looking into it. Whereas a cattle fence, my cat knocking stuff over. Whereas a cattle fence is designed differently. A cattle fence is designed to keep cattle in, right? Not necessarily, and to some degree to keep cattle rustlers out. But it's not necessarily meant to be like a privacy fence. This is more of a rural fence in this regard. But she says it's a good fence. It's a good fence. It's well made. And if you've ever worked out on a farm before, making a fence is pretty hard work. She says this is a good fence. But she doubts my own haywire, right, which is a very specific word. And haywire, we have it, if you've ever heard about this in terms of like slang, right? To be haywire is to be kind of all over the place, to feel like you have no control of anything. But it's also a very specific way to wrap a fence line. But I doubt my own haywire will hold up to all this blank sky. So open and explicit. So really, up until this point in the poem, we haven't really had a moment that's misunderstandable. I mean, we might be able to argue that like this is a little bit this could be a little bit more complicated, a little more abstract. And Generations Dissolved is an image she's asking us to think about how we can do that one, but it doesn't seem that far-fetched. But here, it's way more of an image of that requires a bit of imagination. Saying that I have a good fence, okay? I've made a good fence. Fences are made to keep the cattle in, keep cattle rustlers out. But I'm pretty sure that this haywire that I have here, my own haywire, will hold up to all the blank sky. So open and explicit. So it's this idea. So an explicit sky versus an implicit sky. Explicit is to be stated purposefully, right? To be a thing that to be explicit is to say, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, exactly what it is. And just saying that the sky is that way. It is open, it is blank, and it is explicit. And it's massive, right? The sky is, of course, massive. It is, right? The sky. And she's saying that basically the fences that we make, right? These fences that are good fences that are designed for very specific purposes are in other ways totally useless. She can't keep in or out the sky. There's nothing that she can do with that particular space. She doubts it, at least, though it is a good fence. So the way that we build things, the way that we make things, the way we manufacture the world is not necessarily beneficial, because the larger sense of the world, such as here with the generations, which is also a larger sense of the world, doesn't necessarily care what you do to make that work, right? Because it's open and it's explicit. She then compares herself. So I have two different similes here, right? So she's using similes again and again. She says, I'm like a fence. And notice the structure is pretty much the same, right? 2 lines equaling a sentence, 2 lines equaling a sentence, 1 line with 2 sentences. 2 lines equaling a sentence, 2 lines equaling a sentence, 1 line as a sentence. That's kind of fun. It's very structured, very much like trying to work her way through this particular experience through repetition of structure. I'm like a fence. So I am a fence, but I'm like one. Or also, or a cow, right? So I'm either that which keeps a thing in, or I am the thing which is kept in, or I am simply this word, this concept of out there, yonder, right? Just as it would be with that open sky. So the way she feels is really like, I'm either like a thing that keeps stuff in and out, or I'm the thing that is being kept in and out, or I am the idea that cannot be kept. So to me, this goes back to this idea of the paradox, right? She can't be all of these things, and she isn't, because she uses or, not and. But it also tells me that she has a sense of, the speaker here has a sense of not knowing, right? Of being unaware, of having a type of sense of who she is, because she's given us only 3 options. She hasn't given us like 20 different options, she's given us 3, but she can't choose from them, and all 3 are very specifically different things. So she's arriving in a number of different places, and she gets a little bit more imaginative as the stanza goes on. So what does this tell me so far? It tells me that in stanza 1 that she wanted to try and be terrific. And then in stanza 2, she arrives at the space of, she just has a crowded head, right? The you here has a crowded head. And the space is open enough that she can walk to the point where you could clear it, she could really clear it up. And there's a good fence here, but it's not going to hold out the largesse of the world. It's not going to keep away or keep at bay or keep out everything else that's there. It'll keep out some things and it'll keep in some things, but there's going to be stuff that experiences beyond that. And in that space, she becomes like the fence. I'm partly something that keeps something in and something that keeps out, but I'm just as much that which is kept in and that which is kept out, which is incredibly complicated to think about. I am both one and the other. I am the alpha and the omega. I am the yin and the yang. I embody both, she is saying. But and on top of that, I'm also this other thing, this other abstract thing of just largesse, of desire, of I am, as much as I want to try and be terrific, I am as much want as I am try. So the poem at this point hasn't really arrived at anything, and we won't really arrive at anything until the third strophe, which I'm going to leave to you to work with in your particular prompt. But I think we can see so far that what she's really trying to deal with, or what she's dealing with, are a number of different ideas. Doubt, unsurety, trying to figure out herself in a space where she's not particularly understanding it. And what we can think about now is when I just pointed out how it goes 2 lines, 2 lines, 1 line, 2 lines, 2 lines, 1 line, which if you look at it in the third stanza again, it'll be 2 lines, one becomes 1 sentence, 2 lines, 1 sentence, and then last line's 1 sentence. I think there's an argument to be made there how line and sentence are operating. And this will be my last thought here, is that because she's unsure of exactly how she is, because she's unsure of exactly how she feels with these ors that show up, right? These ORs, the ors, that when we are in a place of confusion, when we feel that we don't really know at an existential level what we are or what we should be or what we're supposed to be, we have some choices, but we can't decide, right? Like, am I a father? Am I a teacher? Am I a person? Am I a son? Am I a YouTube star, obviously. In that space, we have a need to compartmentalize. We have a need to create categories. We have a need to make structure. And she's doing that with the line and sentence, saying, I'm going to find the space for it. I'm going to control it in that moment. So I think we can see that in there. So a lot of things to consider as we enter into this last strophe that you're going to be writing about for your homework for the Wednesday response journal. So good luck with that. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.